Okay, let's get started this evening. It's Thursday, October 21st, 2021 at 6:30. This is the Halliwell Review Committee. First item on our agenda is roll call. Mr. Gerton?
Here.
Mr. Halliwell?
Here.
Mr. Nigerian?
Here.
Mr. Corvo?
Here.
Mr. Mayo?
Here.
Mr. Savini?
Here.
Mr. Simpkins?
Here.
And the chairman is here. The second item on the agenda is review and approval of draft meeting minutes from the October 7th, 2021 meeting. Give everybody a minute to take a look at those.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting minutes are set. All right, next item on our agenda for discussion, consideration, and action. Progress of outreach by committee members. This evening we have representatives from the YMCA. So I will just turn it over to you folks, and if you wouldn't mind, we have the podium. There is a microphone, so if you could just go ahead and talk right into that, and we'll be good to go.
I was contacted by Bob Mio about the possibility of the YMCA collaborating with your committee. So today I brought with me our CEO, Charlie Clifford, one of our board members, Dr. Pat Nugent, and the director of the Woonsocket YMCA, Kristen Quinn, and Mark Casson just walked in. He's our COO. So we're here just to serve kind of informally so that you guys can get to know us. Maybe we can talk about some possibilities. What I've given to you here is just a couple of things, just kind of an overview of our strategic roadmap, just to show you what our thoughts are and kind of where our hearts are in terms of working with the community. The next first page is just a little history about us. We've been serving Rhode Island communities since 1889. We serve all of northern Rhode Island right now, and we have 5 different locations and then some child care sites in addition to that. And our mission is stated there, and our goals and programs are based on 3 things: healthy living, youth development, and social responsibility. The next page just shows you our diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that was just adopted by our board last year. We're really concerned with equality and making sure that there's access for everybody. And then I wanted to give you a little sampling of what programs WISE typically do run, so you'd have an awareness of that. So this first page is community impact programs. We run several programs that are offered free to the community no matter where we're located, and those are Live Strong, which is a cancer survivor program. It's 12 weeks to help people regain their strength after they've been through or even during while their treatment. Our diabetes prevention program and our adaptive programming. Our adaptive programming works with all ages and all types of abilities, disabilities. And then our active older adults, because I know you're looking at a senior center, so I wanted to let you know what kind of programs we typically run. And it really centers on functional fitness and social connectiveness. The next page is just a sample of our programs that are upcoming at the Lincoln Y and kind of family events that we do. And then I'm offering you a free challenge to improve yourself, spirit, mind, and body, if you want to. This is the Strong Challenge. It's just started. It's a virtual challenge, and it's free to everybody. And it just inspires you to get moving 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week. And there's all kinds of free resources, including personal trainers and recipes and family activities. So feel free to join that. Last but not least, I did a lot of research across the nation to try to find samples of collaborations. And so these are the ones that I was able to get the most information on. And they come with a variety of funding sources, a variety of MOUs. So it's really going to be dependent upon, what you'd like to do and what we're able to do and want to do. And hopefully we can get a win-win-win out of this. So I'll stop there and just kind of see what kind of questions you guys have.
So
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Pawtucket Family YMCA is multiple locations. So Heritage Park, where is that?
That's in Pawtucket.
Okay. Westwood YMCA?
That's in Coventry.
Okay. And it does one membership in the Pawtucket YMCA enable you to utilize all these facilities?
Yeah, and not only that, across the nation. Once it's a little give and take right now with COVID, but in general, when we get past this, your Y membership enables you to use any Y across the nation.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I go to visit my son in LA, and I'm a dad swimmer. I just go to the Y in LA. It's great. Because I do a lot of traveling, so wherever I go, just go to the Y. It's great.
How would, I think with Bob's initial outreach and as part of this committee's task, how does the Y see itself fitting into this community to help us understand how it would work if we were to become partners, if you will?
Right. So North Smithfield is already in our service area. We have multiple members, both at our Woonsocket YMCA and our McCall YMCA in Lincoln. So it's definitely a service area that we're interested. Our present location in Woonsocket is a difficult location. It's kind of in the middle of the city, and there's no parking, and there's no outside space for kids or anything like that. So, we would see this as an extension of what we're doing already in the area, and, kind of work it piece by piece depending on what you guys are looking for. We really exist to serve the community. So it's really what the community's looking for, what the community desires, and the Y, to as much as the extent possibility, tries to address the community needs.
So would you be looking at leasing the land from the town?
So that's a great question, and the answer is I don't know. So the different ones that I've researched right now, a variety of things. Sometimes the town gave the land to the Y. Sometimes the town built the building and the Y just operates it, just has an operating MOU. Sometimes the Y does lease. So there's just a variety of things, and it just really depends on what everybody can afford and what you really, think is going to work for the town the best. I think one of the really good examples is the first one, which is the Austin Y. And the building was built through bond funds. It's a 30,000 square foot facility. And they have a third, 3,000 feet at least of it is for community use at no charge, all hours of operation. And then they run special programs and stuff too. The Y provides the daily maintenance and operations to the public. The city actually still owns the facility. Some of the other ones, the Y owns it. The aquatic center, I talked to them a great deal. The county paid for that to be built. And the Y has a long-term operational lease that they run a Y and provide free community use for the swim teams and free swim lessons and open lap swim and stuff.
How do the models in Rhode Island, and particularly the ones closest to us and maybe in Mass work?
Mm-hmm.
Are they Y totally owned and operated, or is it kind of very
Most of them are. The Lincoln Y, however, what did start off as town property and a town recreation center. And I don't know all the details of that. I don't know if Charlie knows all the details to that. Yeah. There is, in the summertime, the outdoor pool usage is still open for like day passes for community members, barring COVID again. So, but it is now Y property, so.
It,
I was gonna say, so I know one of the consistent concerns that our residents have had, actually two things. One, they've overwhelmingly said that they want to keep the land to use for something as opposed to selling it. But the second concern that they have is, this property has been utilized for the community as a school, which in essence is an expense to the residents in the form of taxes when they were sending their children to the school. But what I wouldn't want is for us to potentially go down a road like this, where the town residents feel as though they're not getting an added valued benefit as opposed to other community members outside of the town. So is there something creative that could be done where we could make it appealing and acceptable for residents to feel as though they're getting a deal for these types of services as opposed to just paying like anybody else?
Yeah, there's a couple models in here where, well, first of all, they carve out specific areas that are just free for community use. So let's say there was part of this building is a senior center that might be open, all day long for seniors in the community at no charge. And classes run and that type of thing. If they wanted to join and take on more YMCA type programming and stuff, then most of these models would give like a 20% automatic discount off of whatever a Y membership or a Y program was for community members. And it's likened to, recreation programs charge for some programs. So it would be kind of on that level. Do you have an active recreation program now in town?
For the kids, not for seniors.
Okay.
Not nearly, in my opinion, I've been involved with it for a while, to the extent we could or should have.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly, any programs would be an added value. I'm curious about just a rough estimate on rates and fees, family, individual. Give us a rough idea of what that might be.
Yeah, I can tell you what we're running right now, but I can also tell you that the YMCA does do a membership for all, which is you pay based on your family size and your family income. And there's, no barriers to that. You come in, you tell us, this is my family size, this is my annual income, and you'll pay a discounted rate up to 60% off. But a family membership is $78 a month. An individual is $51 a month, an adult. A young adult is $27, and a teen is $27.
Okay.
Some of the health plans will give you a discount for
Yeah, health plans reimburse you, and seniors also get free use of everything at a Y, generally if they have a fitness benefit package on their Medicaid.
But do any of your, I think, maybe what you were asking, but do any of your facilities offer like a town resident rate versus an out-of-town resident rate?
We do not typically, so this would be different because it would be a collaboration.
it appears from all these other locations that you're rather flexible as to how you enter into an arrangement with a particular municipality.
Well, I would say Ys across the nation are fairly flexible, in terms of how flexible we'll be is how flexible you'll be, how flexible our board is,
But is
and
that-
how flexible the lawyers are,
But
right?
is that to say that, and I think this would help everybody, is that to say that we could arrange to, if the interest was there from both parties, a multi-use facility which could be one structure or could be connected via a walkway of some sorts, in keeping with the architecture out there, where the senior center, that's a combination mixed-use senior and youth and what have you, is then complements another structure that would be unique to your programs. And they would interact to some extent, but your entity is what it is. It's by itself, it operates itself entirely. It's not dependent on the town to assist it in any way other than the land, the real estate, and how that deal is arranged? Is that?
Again, there's a bunch of different models. In some cases, if the city owns the building, they do the major maintenance, just like a landlord would. In some cases, the Y purchases everything that's inside, completely outfits it with all of the equipment and that type of thing, and would operate and do all the maintenance on that. So there's a lot of detail kinds of things
Is
that
there a
would.
minimum size? Because you may or you may not be aware that although visually it appears to be a very large lot, there's precious little buildable area. And of course, I think while we all may be very excited or interested in this additional option, we would probably need to be able to blend it in with a structure that was for the community specifically, complemented by something that your programs can supplement. So, and the other question I guess I had was, are you then have to push any decision you make to a national board? You can do it all through the Pawtucket entity? Okay. And so this would take quite a bit of time, and so you're not restrictive to say to this town or any other town, we must have a pool, we must have this, we must have that. If we say to you, this is how much square feet we can conceivably give to you for a footprint, you can, it doesn't have to be a full-service entity. It can fit whatever is available if it passes your local board's assessment and analysis. So we have ultimate flexibility. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Yeah, and I think, again, it depends on what people are looking for. I don't know how much access you have to pools right now, but that is generally a pretty important part of a YMCA, simply to make sure you can make sure kids don't drown and they learn how to swim and those kinds of things, and it's great for seniors too.
With that in mind, do you recall off the top of your head, Lincoln's square footage is about 20,000 square feet?
So bigger than that. Yeah,
40?
It's 40, yeah.
But the pool, it doesn't have to be, it didn't have to be 40, the pool takes up 8 or 10?
Probably 10.
Okay.
Yeah, a full-size YMCA can, probably about 30,000 square feet would give you everything, including space for senior center and community meeting space and, club space and.
But based on the proximity of the property to Lincoln, is it your assessment initially, without doing great investigation, that there's a need for an equal-sized pool?
Yeah,
Okay,
we don't.
so I'm inquiring, I'm just curious, because we would have to substantiate it, and you wouldn't want to get into a relationship that you didn't think was gonna be productive, so, okay.
I've just got a question. The main concern I have is that community center, senior center definitely has to be there, and it has to be free for the community. I'd also like to see, only because my church has it right now, the food pantry in that area to make it easier for use. What you're saying, and I'm intrigued by what happened here in Austin, you're saying that they kept 3,000 of their 30,000 square foot building strictly for the community, for their use and their activity. You had nothing to do with it? Is that what you're saying?
It's in the
could be
same
done?
building and it's staffed by Y people.
Okay.
At no cost, though, to the community. So there's
Okay.
like a computer lab that's in there, there's group exercise classes that they
Okay.
use, there's locker rooms, there's time in the pool that's used by community members at no charge.
Well, right now, I'm working with the city of Woonsocket on a senior program. I'm just overseeing a little bit of it. And they've got cornhole. We played outside. And we're gonna go, we're trying to find a place to go inside because the seniors want to continue playing it. So what I'm saying is, if we had something like that here in North Smithfield, in that 3,000 square foot area, we'd be able to have cornhole or do whatever we want without any interference with the Y. That's the relationship we could possibly have, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a little even closer than that. It's like, the Y staff at no cost to anybody is monitoring that and running some programs and helping people because they're there anyways, right? So you might as well get kind of a double bang for your,
So then would North Smithfield residents get a different card to identify themselves?
a good question. I'm not a detail person.
Okay, okay. I'm just thinking, as a community member, you want to feel as though,
Yeah, you have.
to some
you have
degree, it's your own
access.
thing.
Right.
And it's exciting to live in the town because you have access to this,
Mhm.
I see it differently because I live in Lincoln and I go to the Halliwell, Lincoln-wise, so much more glamorous and so on. It's so much seamless. It's just cooperation.
Yeah, I'd say North Smithfield's a little bit different though, in that sense, as far as residents, longtime residents, and them holding on to the property as dearly as they do.
It becomes the centerpiece of the community, and as a physician, like I'm an obstetrician, so it's so good for seniors, I'm becoming a senior, I am one, and kids, it's just for the overall health of the community, it's just no-brainer.
No, I agree. I agree. It's good. It will be good for the community because it's better than what we have now, which is nothing. But I'm just saying, going forward in that direction, we just have to be mindful of not deviating from how the town feels about the property itself.
Even though I have a home in Narragansett, I go to Narragansett, that's a very different community, but people are very provincial, like Rhode Island, But the nice thing with the Y, it becomes almost seamless, it really does. The people in North Smithfield will be thrilled to have this great place. And it becomes seamless, and I don't think they really, I don't know, when I go to the Narragansett Y, it's in Narragansett, it's a very different feel than the soccer or anything, but the people that go there just enjoy the facility, it becomes seamless.
I think one of the concerns might be, as long as we could kind of establish, because this is just an informal meeting, nobody has really done anything other than to do the base level introductions and understand. But I think if the sense moving forward, if the council or the powers that be decided to do further investigation, would be to kind of ensure the town that we could coexist, if you will, on the same parcel, where we can give the town community members and taxpayers and what they desire, which is the senior multi-use facility inclusive of senior and youth and all others, and then offer the complement of another use which is clearly has extremely high positive feedback from the entire country, for that matter. Probably the general positive reaction, I think, to your facilities is very high. So if it were kind of communicated and informally that the intent would be that if we were to move in any forward direction, it would be that we coexist, that we are able to give the town people what they want, and conceivably give them a complementary use which would be beneficial to all of us. And in my mind, that was the spirit of which you came here, because it's probably too early in the game for you to even to say whether you would need a 10, a 5, or 20,000 square footer building, and whether or not when we start to lay out what we think we're going to recommend, how much land we have, and whether we could do that all with one building, or whether we could, in fact, do it with two if, again, people decided that was the direction they wanted to go. So, I think it's a very positive premise, and you've given us a lot to think about.
I have a question about the general organization structure of the Y. So it's obviously there are Ys everywhere, right? You have mentioned that your group is responsible for a number of Ys in the northern part of the state. There's a Y in Smithfield, there are Ys in Providence. What is the relationship between you, the National Y, those Ys that I don't think you're affiliated with? I'm just not clear on how that works.
So I think the easiest way to understand it is that you could kind of think of YMCA as a franchisee and YUSA as a franchisor. But They're not, because it's a nonprofit and they're run by volunteer boards. And the volunteer boards are really for each local community. Those boards are the ones that make sure that the Y stays vibrant for its own community. But the national would dictate just some basic stuff, like you pay national dues and you have a certain level of professionalism for your directors, that you use the brand the proper way. And they offer a lot of trainings and stuff like that, but no interference at a local level whatsoever. And then Ys grew just through the years in different ways. Some Ys just stayed in their own community and didn't grow at all. Smithfield is one of those. It's a standalone Y. It's not formally connected in any fiduciary capacity to any other Y. In Pawtucket, it grew. We had Woonsocket that needed help, and so we merged with the Woonsocket YMCA. We built a new Y in Lincoln because we had been running childcare there and the community wanted a Y there. So that's how we ended up with 5 branches. There's some Ys that have practically the whole state. They have branches every place in the state. And we're just basically tied together but with an alliance so that we support each other, so that we have some consistency, and we all follow the same mission, and we all follow the same kind of core values.
Thank you, that helps a lot. So I guess sort of a related question, because you have Ys in Lincoln and Pawtucket, and the one in Smithfield is just around what Robert had asked, kind of saturation, right? So, and I don't know that you can provide this since you're not affiliated with the Smithfield Y, but I'm curious how many of our town residents are actually Y members, and whether that's a comparable number to other towns that have a Y in town. So what I'm getting at, is there sort of a way to figure out, is there a portion of our community that is currently underserved by not having access to a Y in town? And, if we were to offer that, what sort of numbers might we expect, both from our residents and from neighboring towns coming in?
Yeah. I mean, we would have to do a study on that, but I can just kind of give you an overall view that, in general, people will only travel about 10 minutes to get to a YMCA.
Well, it's Rhode Island, so.
Maybe 15 if there's not a lot to do in the community. So, if you're from Burrowville, you might want to come to North Smithfield to be at a YMCA, but you're probably not going to travel all the way to Lincoln, So where Halliwell is located, it's about 3.4 miles away from Woonsocket. So that would be the biggest overlap, and North Smithfield is considered part of the service area for Woonsocket. It's about, I think, 10 miles away from the Lincoln Y, and it's 18 miles away from the Smithfield Y. So Smithfield Y is the least affected by it. We could run our own numbers to see how many people live in North Smithfield and get that to you pretty easily, but there's some great demographic studies that we can also get a hold of.
I'm wondering, some of my fellow committee members brought up, if we went with a certain model, maybe where the Y does not have a financial investment, but our town is kind of lacking in the recreation department and the program department. If the town were to go ahead, build a community center, build a senior center, what would a partnership look like? Where would the Y be prepared to step in and fill that void? Because it's going to be a large expense for the town to suddenly get more recreation staff, offer programs. Is the Y able and prepared to step in that, to do either after school, weekend stuff, staff-wise? What would it maybe look like revenue sharing wise? Would there be all revenue generated from a program going directly to the Y, and we provide the space? What would that model look like?
Yeah, so there's other examples of that. Generally, it's a management agreement, and all those details would kind of be worked out in there. But what we find, and the reason there are so many examples of these kind of community and YMCA partnerships is because the Y's kind of business model and expertise is to do these things. So we do before and after school care, and we do, we do fitness programs, and we do sports programs. And so we've kind of worked it out to a science, and it's usually we're able to provide better and more programs than a regular recreation department would be able to do at a, better cost.
Continuing on that thinking, if we have a Y in the town, the natural place to have your basketball program, as opposed to what we have now, a little bit here, a little bit there.
Well, you could do the best of both worlds. Well, that was the best. You could marry the two, where it's a town building, but the YMCA maybe has the staff to run instructional. I mean, we have a great Norman Hoops who would love to be able to get additional gym space, but you want to run a yoga class, a fitness class, a art class. It's hard to find those instructors, but the Y seems to have the ability to tap into those people and bring that in. So I just was kind of exploring that a little bit.
Okay. Let me ask this, Janine. If we did develop something, would there be there would be a master plan contract then with all this spelled out before we do anything?
Correct. Yeah, and I have samples of it too. I mean, we haven't looked through them all ourselves. One of them is 53 pages long, so.
Right.
Yeah, so
I
they
mean,
can
to
be.
protect you and to protect us. It has to be clear that when if we say, we want to put the basketball program in, okay, it's going to cost us something or it's not going to cost us something. Who's going to run it? Who's going to, so that, okay, thank you.
Couple questions, actually. Starting from scratch, right? You got a blank piece of land. What's the ideal model for the Y? What would be your preference? Do you buy the land? Do we keep the land and we build a building? Like, what is the ideal model of the Y?
Yeah, I don't know if we don't have an answer for that, because we would bring that to our board with options, and boards are the ones that make the policies for us. And Charlie, I don't know if you have a different answer than I.
I think every YMCA across the country, their main job is to make sure that where they are responds to their community's needs. So if it was basketball or childcare or a pool or whatever, that community needs survey would probably be the basis for what the business model and the square footage model look like moving forward. So, I think our purpose of being here tonight is to sort of introduce ourselves to you guys. You can sort of check up on us and do your research, but just get an introduction. And then and then for us to learn a little bit more about what your community is looking for, because we have a presence in most of the towns in Northern Rhode Island, but we kind of, after we get past north of Woonsocket, we don't know as much about this community as you guys do. So it's really a matter of understanding the community's needs and seeing how the Y's programs and services and facilities would meet those needs. There's a saying in the Y that if you've seen one Y, you've seen one Y, because they're all really, they have their core programs, but there's a lot of Y's that don't have any walls and they just run programs in other facilities. There's Y's that just run homeless and housing operations. We do a tremendous amount of work in feeding kids, especially during COVID when all the schools shut down. We stepped up to the plate in a number of our communities to serve kids who didn't have enough food during COVID. So it really would probably start with that community needs focus, and learning more about what your town wants for facilities and programs, and then sort of building it out after that. So that's how I would answer that.
Could you did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Why don't you go, then I'll come back.
All right. I was just going to ask, what is that process that you guys go through to determine the community needs? Because we've gone through our process of having a survey, asking folks what they'd like to have. We've had a community charrette that yielded a certain amount of results. Could you kind of explain what your process would be like?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're all a little bit different, but gathering all the information you guys already have is key. That's probably the biggest thing. And then there's a couple of national consultants that the Y's work with on a regular basis to do this stuff. Some of them are sort of quick down and dirty studies, and some of them are studies through the school systems or through churches and all that kind of stuff. So I think that the purpose would be really get down to the best understanding of everybody probably has 5,000 different needs that they want this to satisfy. What are we good at doing? What are we not good at doing? And having a candid conversation with you guys about, you know, kind of this is what we are, but this is what we're not. And so we probably, if it got very serious, we probably engage one of those folks to do a study. Or if you guys feel like you have a thorough review of that already, we'd love to get our hands on that and see what, you know, learn more about the community and see what you're looking for.
Oh, I think we have that, right, based upon
Yeah, we do.
the survey information we have. So to me, it feels like we have that community information.
And we'd love to have that.
And then,
We've read the PowerPoint presentation with the different land scenarios and the parking information.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
all we have.
Right.
Chris has his master presentation that he could probably share with you. I don't, not speaking for everyone else, but to me, it feels like we have that, and we know what you guys are good at,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, now it comes down to how, right? How, and who's gonna do what, and who's gonna pay for it, ultimately.
Well,
That's why I was asking the question, like, in your opinion, like, what would the ideal model be for you?
So, our organization, so, one of our dirty secrets is we're not great fundraisers. So we have a lot of growth to do in there. So for us to raise money in North Smithfield with no presence here right now, and, not knowing what the philanthropic community is like here, and not having those relationships, and that credibility and that trust, you know, building, the McCall YMCA Lincoln here would probably be $17 million, you know, so, that would probably, scare us, if we were responsible for all that fundraising. Borrowing all that money and then paying down that debt service is, extremely expensive even in this interest rate environment, because we have a fair amount of debt on the Lincoln location. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think at first blush, most of the models where the towns have really, or more so the counties have really good relationships with the YMCA's, the facility's been built, and then there's some sort of a long-term lease agreement with the YMCA and that county. Obviously, in the Northeast, we don't have county government in a real way. But that's, you know, at first blush, that's where my head goes. Especially talking about a pool and basketball gymnasiums and stuff, there's tremendous amounts of overhead with all of that stuff, as you guys know.
I think just as one quick observation in my mind is, I mean, I think we need to kind of stay in a narrow lane, only because anything further probably has to come with the consultation from the town council to say that, all due respect to them, they may or may not embrace the idea, and we don't have that authority, so we don't want to mislead anybody. But also, I guess, just to kind of summarize in my mind, if we did a two-building facility, of course, the Y building has to be clearly identified as a YMCA facility. And then it could either be attached to or part of a larger structure or supplemental structure that the town would operate. And then the question would become, if that were to be the base, then the question would be to what extent we have overlap in administration of programs, because clearly you have a level of, whether we use the word profit or income, you obviously have to cover your services, and you need to charge enough to sustain yourself. So there is going to be fees involved, but you could argue that if a municipality does it, they have to charge fees because we got to cover operational expenses and manpower expenses that we talked about. So it looks to me like there is a opportunity for people who aren't afraid to think outside the box. If our driving force here is to satisfy the needs of the community, for me personally, it's a refreshing opportunity that we at least have a receptive, well-established, highly regarded entity that we conceivably could do something with. So, but it's a long road.
Absolutely. All this community development work is how we describe it internally is messy stuff. And we know there's a lot of late-night meetings and stuff that are had, and sometimes it produces something great, and other times we built a lot of relationships
independent from province-wide or the Smithfield-wide, independent from the national YMCA. And Mark House and Dr. Nugent and 17 other board members sort of make that, you know, ultimately have fiduciary responsibility for making those decisions. But that's kind of, you know, a little bit more about how we operate. So the model in North Smithfield for many years has been youth sports are very well represented through associations. Volunteer driven, do a great job with pretty much all the sports we have. And then the kids get older and they get to high school, and there's certainly less participation as it gets more competitive, right? And then they get out of high school, and basically there's been nothing for a long time. We have sporadic adult leagues that pop up, but nothing lasting, nothing that can be sustained. I've been in I think a good model might be Lincoln. And I've been in your facility in Lincoln. It's fantastic. The job that was done over there when you built that new facility was about 15 years ago, maybe? 2012. Okay. How was that approach with the Lincoln community as far as integrating with I know Lincoln does a great job with youth sports as well. How was that approached and integrating with the Lincoln programs? And personally, I look at it as supplemental and another avenue. And then beyond that, for adults, whereas we have basically nothing, it's 100% better than what we have now. So did the community welcome what you did over there, and how has that gone since that time?
Yeah, well, so right before COVID hit, we had 14,000 members. Pretty popular. And in terms of the integration, there's a lot of community usage of the Y without membership. So, for instance, there was football practice there as I was leaving tonight. The Lincoln swim team swims in the pool and it holds their meets in our pools. The Blackstone Valley Prep also has their swim team in our pool. We have wheelchair basketball 3 days a week. We have basketball leagues for every age, from preschool all the way through like senior basketball and pickleball, and so it's very busy all the time, and it's used almost every hour of operation for some kind of recreational.
So how does that work? Like, so if I'm a coach in Lincoln and I say, hey, I need field time, do I call, and is there like a kind of off the menu a la carte rate that I pay? Okay.
You know, I played in the basketball league in the Woonsocket Y for many years. And the gym is much bigger than this room, right? Really. But to have the opportunity as well, I imagine the pool can be a pretty good revenue producer. Based upon if swim teams that we don't have a swim team in North Smithfield, we don't have a pool. So
You might.
it's, the opportunities for everything beyond youth are just tremendous. When you look at this list and what you can put together. So as far as a selling point to the community of North Smithfield, to me, that's it. To supplement what we have and make it better.
I was in the pool the other day with 14 firefighters learning how to save people and take people out in the backwoods. I felt very safe when I was swimming in the pool. So when the fire department goes in there, and police department, they have to test. It's all about operations. And these guys are really good at operational. When I'm a swimmer, I don't want the swim team to be in there when I'm supposed to be swimming. That's my time. But they do it.
Yeah.
It's operations. And look at you guys here. You guys are healthy-looking guys. It makes you a healthier community. So I don't think to sell it hard at all.
And Bob, if you want cornhole,
Yeah. Right. Oh, great, thank you. Thank you, because we're looking, I just talked to Linda Play, and it tries to, where can we go? Because everyone wants to continue, but it's getting cold.
At the senior center, we have senior center swim on YouTube.
Good, okay, thank you. Thank you, I'll pass that on.
To the hospital, Landmark doesn't have a lot of moolah. There's a lot of go between that and the hospital. So it's a seamless, good thing for the community.
So I have a question, and actually, it's probably three parts. Your funding model, do you, being that you're a nonprofit, do you have access to grants, and do you have your own grant writer?
We do. We have a contract grant writer that does some work for us. The last year and a half, it's been tons of COVID work.
Right.
So whatever the communities and the lives are facing, we're trying to get resources. That's primarily what the grant writer's been for. She helps us write a Champlain Foundation grant every single year. Champlin's been extremely generous to the YMCA.
So my next question is, if a partnership were to be viable, we would probably lean on you too for a portion of the funding to come from grants, but could we also utilize you as a town to seek out other grants, community-based, where we as a town could benefit from it, and use your resources as a grant writer?
Yeah, no, I would say in generally, yes. It really comes down to how that particular funder is going to view the partnership. So we have some foundations that we'll work with that say, if you don't own the land, you don't own the building, we're not going to pay to add on to that building because it could get out of your hand. You could lose control of that building. And others that say, you know what, it doesn't matter. If you guys have a long-term lease on that building, we'll continue to fund activities and capital upgrades to that building. So it really depends on what funder and what their criteria is. But the long and short answer is yes.
And I guess where you said you're independent, do you lean on your own local resources, or do you have other YMCA associations or chapters, whatever you want to call it, that you could lean on to as a resource as well?
So it's a federated model, and the national office provides legal support, building support, some fundraising. They support, when I say support, it's mainly council. So we have access to all of that if we've never done something. So for instance, Janine wants to know about what are the other partnerships and collaborations like this in other parts of the country. We can hit up the research department and they'll run us a list of these are all the other partnerships and collaborations that kind of sound similar to what might happen in Smithfield. So there's a lot of council through the national Y, and then there's a fair amount of sort of partnership and collaboration amongst the local YMCA's as well, even though right at this point in time, we all remain independent, separate, independent nonprofit organizations with our own EIN numbers, our own board of directors, and all that good stuff.
Okay, and then last question, I know I said this last time.
Fun stuff.
Where you had mentioned that this is kind of your geographical territory. Are you just saying that loosely, or I guess what would prevent us from maybe going to another successful Y chapter like the Hockomock?
Sure, yeah. So you hit on this massive hornet's nest actually right now, basically.
I know Ed, so yeah.
And Ed's a good friend of our Y too. So and Ed, they do a great job. So if you didn't go to us, I would say go to Ed. But we have it's called service areas in the YMCA, and so those service areas are all registered with the national YMCA, and that's one of their functions is to sort out if there's a service area dispute. And so it would be hard for Ed to come into this service area and do something without our permission. The sentiment in the Y amongst all the CEOs and the national offices now is that we don't want to let service area get in the way of serving the town's community's needs. So if you guys said, we have to have a 100,000 square foot facility and it has to have 14 pools and indoor tracks and all this stuff, and we said there's no way we can do that. We're not interested in doing that. And you went to Ed. Ed could do it with our permission, basically. And then you get all these, then there'd be conversations after that about how each place stays sustainable in that model. But North Smithfield is assigned to our association, and that's sort of a short answer. But
Okay.
it's a real hot topic now.
I get it.
Because there's some YMCA's that are not in the position to step up to the plate on some of these things because they're financially strapped, and we're pretty. We have a pretty good rainy day fund and are not overly leveraged with debt, thankfully. So there's some operating characteristics of our Y that I think probably make us relatively attractive
I have a related question to that. So would that mean that anything that's done here is financially tied to the other properties that you own?
Probably that'd be more of a question on how those documents got drafted up. I mean, it gave the town, it just depend on how the model is set up.
Okay.
The way our we're a pretty transparent organization. The way we're set up now, we have branches that produce a good net income, like the Lincoln facility, and then we have branches that we subsidize, like Woonsocket. So our goal in the association is sort of balance all that out with all of our separate branches. And the primary goal is to make sure that whatever Y is in that community is serving that community. But it's a lot easier to turn a profit in Lincoln than it is in Woonsocket. But our YMCA doesn't want to turn its back on any of the communities that it serves, regardless of their needs. And so that's kind of one of those things that we want to make sure that we communicate, because that's part of our DNA, that no one is turned away from a YMCA. And that does mean something when you get down to, how these facilities are designed and that kind of stuff.
So, but Smithfield is its own standalone?
It is, yeah.
Have they been asked to be, have you guys asked them to be part of your group?
Yes, we have.
What's the reason for,
I would say there's a fair amount of provincialism still there. That sort of, I don't think we've done a great job of explaining sort of the economy of scale that
Right.
they would gain if they joined us. We used to do their finances for them and run their HR services, so we still do a fair amount of partnering, but at this point in time, we still remain an independent line.
so within your network of facilities, I understand every model's different in terms of how they come about, but from an operating standpoint, do you guys share resources across all 5?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Staffing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We sort of, it's not obvious. So I'm the CEO of the Pawtucket YMCA
Right.
Association, which is a silly name because, that was the initial Y in the group is how we got Pawtucket, but it's really most northern Rhode Island, Coventry, Exeter, and West Greenwich. So I'm the CEO. I have an HR director. I have a finance director. We have corporate staff in my office in downtown Pawtucket that provide sort of the backbone to operating all these recreation centers everywhere. And then the branches have staff that are pretty much solely dedicated towards serving their communities. So Kristen, to make sure that the Woonsocket Y serves Woonsocket, she has her own aquatics director, she has her own membership director, she's looking for a health and wellness director. So, that crew of people is pretty much dedicated to making sure that they serve that community's needs as best as the Y can. So, anything that makes sense to do on economy of scale is sort of my responsibility, and then all the program delivery, it comes at the local level.
I think Scott brought up an interesting point around, obviously, staffing and you guys running it. Do you guys provide like a white labeling service? If we decided like, hey, we want to build the building, we want it to be North Smithfield in name, we want to own it from the ground up,
Yeah.
can we outsource the operating function to you
Yeah.
without it being branded as YMCA?
Good question. Probably not. Probably not.
But I got a follow-up to that.
What's that?
So, I always like running different scenarios, and it's strictly hypothetical, but, so we could potentially, as a town, and again, strictly hypothetical in case anyone out there is listening, we could go out for bond, have you guys pay a portion of the note, and manage it with operating expenses. And again, I don't know what that percentage would look like, but you're just not on the hook to going out and holding that note. Is that correct?
That's one of the many different models.
Right,
that are out there.
right, okay.
Most my experience from looking at these different relationships across the country, most of the time, like I said, the county builds a facility. It's what the county wanted and what the people wanted, and they decide, we're not really great at running this thing. So usually after it's been built and been run for a few years, that's usually when they ask the Y to step in and say, we're not doing this really well. Can you guys run this for us? And that's generally how these things huge sucks of utilities and lifeguarding coverage and aquatic directors and all that kind of stuff. So you can make a ton of money off renting your pool and having all the swim teams in there and all that kind of stuff. But you can rent a pool when the kids are out of school. All the other hours of the day, you still have to operate the pool filters, you still have to put chlorine in there, and you still gotta make sure that you got a lifeguard on the deck covered if something happens. So, this whole mix of programs and services has to, ideally break even or do a little bit better than break even. And so it's usually kind of a hodgepodge of different services. Some that make money, some that lose money, but ultimately all those services hopefully serve the town.
In Lincoln, I believe you run after-school programs in the town schools, correct? Are there any other types of community-based programs that you have like that outside the facility?
We run, we're in four of the four Lincoln elementary schools. We're in four of the Blackstone Valley schools. We transport from North Providence and Cumberland to the Y. And then in terms of going out into the communities, what you're kind of asking about, we offer senior programs, but that kind of all came to us reaching halt, with COVID. But we would go to, we can go to senior centers and run programs and
Okay.
classes and things like that.
And I would say, right, like Alan Moreau, who's the rec director in Lincoln, he used to be a Y employee at the Y in Lincoln, and so he's been, they got a pretty good leagues program. They have a good thing running. We tend to work together. We like to work together with the rec departments and not duplicate services. Some rec departments are really adversarial with their local Y, and others are like, this is crazy. Let's not double dip. And so a lot of times we'll work together to make sure that whatever the community is looking for has that option. If the town can do men's basketball league better than the Y can because they have access to all the schools and they can put the program in all the schools, then they do it. If they can't because the schools are busy with scouts and all that other stuff, then they come to the Y. So it's really kind of depending on the community.
So I think this is a great opportunity. Obviously there are a lot of things to consider and work out, but from what we've heard, what our residents, what we've heard from our residents is that they want a number of services and spaces that we'd be essentially reinventing the wheel to offer. And like you said, it was interesting to hear that a lot of the WISE facilities evolve from community-based projects that wind up being unsustainable, because that's something that all of us have been concerned about. Our residents want something, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Staff that are now town employees that we have to consider. So I think this is an opportunity that the town would be remiss to not continue exploring to figure out if there's a unique sort of arrangement that could work to benefit our 12,000 person community. So two questions to follow up on that. The first one is, what would generally be the next steps from this, sort of introductory conversation?
We'd love to see the community assessment data that you guys have. And also would love to see some, if it's acceptable to how you guys do business in town, some sort of subcommittee that works with some kind of subcommittee of Y staff and also some board of directors. Just to kind of meet and get to know each other, see if there's any trust that builds up over time, and learn more about what you guys are looking for and need, and what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are, so we're not over promising on something that we can have trouble delivering on. If that's a way to do business, I think just sitting down around a table and talking more about the data and getting a better understanding of what you're looking for, what your limitations are, what our limitations are, is I think the way to go.
Great. Then the second part of that question was, I know, from what you said and just, general observation, there's no typical Y, right? However, I'm going to ask, typically, a project from conceptual phase, a meeting like this, to people walking through the door and enjoying the services, are we talking about 5 years, 15 years? What is a average time frame for that kind of thing?
It's really hard to say. A lot of it comes down to the dollars. I worked for a 13 branch association
Thanks.
Follow up on Chris's question, I'm sure you've been to tons of these meetings and seen that you worked in Connecticut and probably other places. What's the biggest or best piece of advice you could give us?
Well, I want to take a minute to thank all of you for spending a good hour up here discussing things with us. I think this has certainly been a very helpful and productive conversation and understanding where some of our options are. I know we have a multitude of different roads that we could be taking, but this is certainly very helpful to us to kind of help guide where we're going in the future. So again, for all of you and everybody, thank you for dealing with our questions and answering them best you can, and just coming up here to chat with us. We very much appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item is Scott was able to tour the South Kingston Community Center. So I'll give Carl a minute to pull that up, and then give everybody a moment just to disperse, and we'll continue on. So why don't we take 5 minutes for a break? So, next up on our agenda was Scott toward the South Kingston Community Center. So, Scott, your PowerPoint presentation is up, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, very good. Want you all to make you feel like you were there. So I did get a chance to go down there. Frank had something come up. He was unable to attend. But Terry Murphy, the director, the Leisure Services Director, who's now the acting town administrator, and Steve Grunberg, who's the Recreation Center Manager, were very generous with their time. Took me around the building. What I handed out to you was a floor plan that she provided to me, as well as a budget for the building. So you can hold on to those, take a look at those at your leisure. They are, floor plan is in the presentation, but the budget is not. So at least it'll give you an idea of what's in the building and also what it costs to run the building. So it is a 13, so if we go to the first slide. It opened in 2017, so they're about 5 years in. It is approximately 29,000 square feet and was about $6 million to build. They had several bonds that were passed over decades, starting way back in the 90s, and then used some general fund money as well to fund the entire building. You can go to the next slide. You can see it's a little dark, but I tried to give you an idea of where the building is located. It sits between the South County YMCA and the Broad Rock Broad Rock Middle School. It was kind of their final component to that Broad Rock complex over there, which includes a senior center and athletic fields. So that kind of helped to complement what they were trying to offer over there. The idea as well in building that building was to provide active recreation. The YMCA, they knew what they offered. They were right next door. They were trying not to duplicate too many services that the YMCA offered. There were a couple of other health clubs in town that they were trying to find their niche, so to speak, and fill a need, but not step on the toes of the other community partners that they had already existed in there. So you can kind of get a sense of where it is in the town and what they have around them. You can go ahead to the next slide. So they started this process way back in about 2012, 2013. It actually goes a little bit farther back than that, but it was more intent. The project was originally looked at as additional gym space for schools in the 90s. Didn't really go anywhere, but there were a couple of bonds passed, so they had been sitting on those for a while. They started to revisit having additional gym space. They were looking for something that was more active in nature because they already had the South Kingstown Guild. The Guild offers has great like classroom space, small meeting room space. They have about a half gym in the Guild. So the Guild was good at providing your arts classes, your small fitness classes, meeting spaces, things like that. They needed some kind of active recreation space. So that was their focus in building this building. That land belonged to the Providence Diocese, and they bought it using an open space grant. The buildings that existed on there were already knocked down by the time the town started up its process in building its rec center, so they didn't have to expend money for that. It was more just expending money for the construction of the building. Like us, they had formed a planning committee comprised of a lot of different stakeholders in the town. There were youth athletic representative, a senior athletic representative, town officials, various members of the community brought together to try and figure out what exactly did they want to offer, kind of how we are operating. As I said, their focus was active recreation, so they had that focus at least to start with. Construction started March of 2016. Lasted almost a year and a half. They officially, so I found a picture online of the groundbreaking back in March of 2016. They had a ribbon cutting opening in June of 2017. So that was over a year, a little under a year and a half for them to go from groundbreaking to people walking in the building and using it. So as I said, they had bonds totaling $4 million that had already been passed in the 90s, back when they were thinking of expanding school gym space. In 2014, they had another $1 million bond passed by the town, and then they just rounded out the cost of the project using transfer from the general fund. You can go to the next slide, which is basically the same layout that I gave you guys in person. It has two gyms, which is one large room, two gym floors, I should say. One large room. It has a curtain divider that will come down. It has two multi-purpose rooms and a smaller multi-purpose room that's become a fitness room. It has locker rooms, bathrooms. So it's really focused on that active recreation. You can see their multi-purpose room space is not as much as what they would offer in the guild. Diving a little deeper, if you want to go to the next slide, they have two multi-purpose rooms, really three, but one of them is the fitness room. They call it the fitness closet. It's not very big, but it has some machinery in it that the public is allowed to use who come in the building. They've said that people who come in and their kids are participating in an activity, they'll go, the parent will go and get on the treadmill or do some other activity in that room. They have two multi-purpose rooms. One is a bit larger than the other, but they're equipped to handle a lot of different activities. There's mirrors on the wall. There's a bar on the wall you would normally see in like a dance studio for ballet. They have a large storage closet in each room in which they store, I didn't take a picture of it, but they store tables, they store chairs, they store equipment for their instructors. Somebody offering a fitness class. They have, so there's a lot of storage space, which is good. So they can go from, an active class like you see there, their staff can then quickly turn around, throw some chairs out, bring some tables out, and they can have a presentation. The room is equipped with both rooms, in fact, the entire building is equipped with Wi-Fi. There are speakers in the multi-purpose room, so they can go from a dance class, from a fitness class, a yoga class, to maybe a more classroom setting with a presentation. So those are the multi-purpose rooms that are there. They do have speakers in the ceiling as well, so they did spend a lot of money on the sound system. Terry had told me it was probably about $60,000 they spent on the sound system throughout, not just the multi-purpose rooms, but also the gymnasium as well. If you want to go to the next slide, just a shot down the hallway there leading to the lobby and the front desk. That is the hallway that has all the multi-purpose the multi-purpose rooms. They have a locker room. They tried to equip it, thinking that they were going to host some high school or middle school sports. They wanted to be able to have a facility that would be that would accommodate interscholastic league events, so that's why there's a locker room in there. There's two showers, and there's I didn't take a picture of the bathroom, but that's part of the bathroom as well. So there's a good amount of space there for people to change, people to shower. One of the showers is handicap accessible. They also have an officials room, so if you were a official officiating a basketball game, whatever, they built it with the intention that they could have their own room to change. The design wasn't quite right. It doesn't have a bathroom. It doesn't have a sink. It just has 10 lockers in it. So if you're an official and you need to go use the bathroom, then you're going to use the public bathroom and possibly get screamed at by the people who are attending the game if you made a bad call.
But hopefully not in North Smithfield because we're civilized like that.
Yes, yes. And the final slide is just I did not take this picture, I grabbed this one online as well, so I can't take credit for it, but it's a nice panoramic shot of the entire gym with the curtain pulled up. Both courts are full basketball courts. There are side hoops that are motorized and can go, well, actually all of them are motorized and can be pulled up for whatever events may be held. There's a batting cage that you can see. Actually, there's 2 batting cages. Those, they said, do not get a lot of use. It doesn't seem like that would be, I wouldn't recommend something like that in a facility if we were looking to do something similar. But what does get a lot of use, the basketball court. There are tennis lines on there. There's not a lot of indoor tennis being played, but they do have an instructional program. There are volleyball lines on the court, which do get used. And one of the far court, not the one closest to us, but the far court, has 3 pickleball lines on it. Very big, very fast-growing sport. They said if there's a way that they could get 3 more on that court, then they definitely could fill it. They get about 50 pickleball players, and once it gets going, winter comes in, people aren't playing outdoors anymore, then they'll get a tremendous amount of interest in pickleball. The other thing they have around there is a walking track. So there's a 2-lane walking track encompassing the entire gymnasium. The public can come in, they can walk around. For the most part, they have people, I mean, with the exception of maybe playing a basketball game, for the most part, they allow the public to walk around unencumbered. The public just knows that they should watch out for, if there's a practice going on or other activity going on, they should watch out for stray balls or players lunging out of bounds. But for the most part, it works out well. They have 2 curtains that will come down. One will separate the courts right down the middle, so they can have 2 separate basketball courts. Another one is set back maybe about 20, 30 feet from the court closest to us. So they can draw that one down, and that court closest to us could kind of be the main showcase court if they want to have a high school game, a kind of showcase game. You can draw that curtain down. They can pull the bleachers in from the back wall. They are motorized to extend as well. So if they want to bring in, they have the Harlem Globetrotters, like D-level team, I guess before you make it to the Globetrotters and you are on their travel team. They've hosted them before, so they'll drop that curtain, kind of bring the bleachers in and kind of create a kind of cozier arena setting. But then they can drop the main curtain and have 2 basketball courts operating at the same time. They have 2 scoreboards, so they can host tournaments, really get going with basketball.
Do the schools use it, Scott? Do you know?
I don't believe so. I think the kids from Broad Rock might come over and use it. I don't recall if the high schools uses it. They are trying to get more kids over from, you saw how close Broad Rock is, so their plan is to try and bring some of those kids over for some after-school activities, have somebody come in. I think that the program was one-on-one. I didn't really look into it, but I think it's something similar to what the YMCA will run, where you pay them, or they partner with them to run after-school programs, and they can provide the staff. They do have a full-time janitor in the building, and they have part-time workers who are at the front desk, responsible for when it's time to change over. Unlike the Y, they don't really have a sign-in, like a card scanning system. You don't have to be a member, but when you come in, they do ask you to sign in for whatever program you're attending, just to help them keep track of who's attending, what kind of attendance do they get for the programs, so at least they know what's worth running, what's working, what's not working as far as attendance-wise. So things that we could kind of look at. It's a lot of work to kind of keep the building maintained. They host a lot of different things, different types of fitness programs, birthday parties, everything from sporting events to your child's birthday party. So it's a pretty well-used building. So I left you with the floor plan so you can kind of get an idea of what the layout of the building is. I left you the budget that was provided to me so you can kind of get an idea of what their operating expense is, and the second page is their revenue, so you can get an idea of what they bring in and what they expend. So it can help us inform us on how do we want to run a facility, whatever it may look like. Not necessarily exactly this model, but at least the costs going into maintaining a building, operating a building, and maybe what we can generate off of that building.
You were able to ask some questions about this?
I was not. I didn't see it until she emailed me that document after I had left, so I was not.
What jumps off the page at me, certainly South Kingston is twice the size of North Smithfield, so a much larger community. If you look at the revenue statement and the line item for general fund transfer, which I'm sure means taxpayer dollars. So that's why I'm sure as well, community members, people who live in town can use it at no expense. They're paying for it through their taxes. I can tell you from my own knowledge that general fund transfer, say for 2021, $349,000 is more than double what our full Parks and Recreation allotted budget is in the town of North Smithfield. More than double, and that's for everything. Includes all the maintenance on our fields, everything that taxpayers in the town of North Smithfield put into our, my point is, this is a huge investment. This is community buy-in. This is a tremendous facility, obviously, but a huge investment on the part of the entire community to keep this going.
I agree.
Yeah.
South Kingston has done a great job investing in recreation. In my experience looking around the state, they probably have the largest recreation staff I have seen. Most cities and towns have a director, have a programmer, a couple of maintenance people, a foreman. They have layers upon layers of recreation, town recreation people, and they've invested. The Guild, this building, multiple outdoor facilities, courts that they maintain, so that South Kingstown has done a great job investing in recreation. Yeah, yep, pretty much a stone's throw.
I think this is really helpful, especially the expenditures breakdown here and the revenue statement. It helps me to sort of relate that to what our town wants. I just looked it up. South Kingston has a population of 30,000, so they're almost 2.5 times the size of North Smithfield. You said this community center was $6 million. Was that right?
Yes.
Okay. In 2007.
Yes. It was.
Well, it was $6 million, and they built it in 17, right?
She said it was, yes, it's a steel building, but I think made to look concrete. Yeah.
So I mean, something like this, it's a great baseline for how we think about, what the costs might be for us, right? Because, residents, they're seeing this and they go, yeah, we want that in town, but all right, well, there are, significant ongoing costs to doing that. And I think that's, this is something great for us to know when we're considering a partnership like with the Y and thinking about the trade-offs in, cost savings to services that can be offered to our residents and things like that. So I don't know, this is just really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it really is, Scott. Thank you. Nice job. What kind of, it's 4 years old, right?
Yeah, about 4.
What kind of shape is it in?
It's good. It looks
They
good.
keep it up.
Yeah. I was kind of envious when I went in there. There was a gentleman on one of those riding floor cleaners, and the floor looked spotless. I mean, they had a guy on there. I wish I had it at my facility to to kind of keep it as clean, but I mean, they put a lot, they have a full-time janitor, so his job is to make sure that place is spotless.
Yeah.
And everything is still, you know, being 4 years old, everything looks in great shape. There doesn't look to be much wear and tear. And the thing about South Kingstown is they're always anticipating what's next. All right, the building is 4 years old, almost 5 years old. Okay, let's start looking at capital. Let's start budgeting for capital improvements. They're not just sitting back thinking, well, we'll rest on it. This building is good. It's how can we maintain it? How can we make it better? What investments can we make to keep this level of quality in our recreation, not just this building, but in all of their sites as
Yeah,
well?
It's understanding that this building may have a 25-year life roof, and then they start putting aside that money after it gets, the day after it gets constructed and completed, that they're starting to set aside money to make sure that we're not short when that replacement time comes.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a concept we've struggled with here in North Smithfield.
I know that's one thing that the planning board has certainly been pushing for as far as town vehicles go, because I know we're the first stop for the budget. So we've been constantly asking, you know, the police chief, the fire chief, all the other departments to say, okay, well, you're gonna be having a big expense for a fire truck in 5 years. Let's start putting some money aside for it now, rather than just getting, you know, this up and down, you know? We need a constant flow, so.
One other observation about this facility is at 29 to 30,000 square feet, probably 2/3 of it is directly related to the activities for the multi-use basketball, volleyball. So it just gives you an idea of square footage relative to weighing what each square foot, what do we want to use it for? 29,000 square foot building is a nice size. And it kind of proves that you could, if you cut the courts in half, you know, and you doubled the size of the function room. So it's a nice roadmap to give us an idea.
I'd be curious, though, I hear you, but, you know, looking at the footprint of the building, right? And then looking at your revenue sheet, and I'm looking at athletic program revenue, right? If you take the basketball court off of that, what does that do to that work? Like, what's generating that athletic program revenue? You would assume it's the courts. Right. That's crazy. No. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think part of our driving force here is, because, you know, when I read, I know it's further on in the agenda, but when I read the enabling motion to create this committee, part of the driving force is to make sure that whatever we do either complements or pulls in existing facilities. I mean, if we have a sufficient number of basketball courts, indoor and/or outdoor, or if we're short outdoor and that's gonna give us the best bang, then that needs to play into what goes into this building, because we have so little space. We don't have that luxury of saying, and it says right here, I mean, you know, we've got a high school gym, we've got the middle school gym, we've got some outdoor facilities, maybe, and clearly, logic would tell you, you can construct outdoor facilities for less money than indoor facilities. So I think it all has to play into the analysis of, and therefore, the square footage is gonna dictate revenue stream necessity and initial capital fund necessity.
Yeah, but, you know, South Kingston has 2 basketball courts in their high schools and their middle schools too, but, you know, they're not generating $130,000 in revenue using those facilities. Yeah. You know, we could, you know, I know Tony who runs NS Hoops, and, yeah, we could host tournaments and we could make 15, 25 grand on a weekend, but, you know, it's not equipped or staffed to do it.
Yeah, but then that goes all the way back to Chris's observation from the get-go on all of this, which is, does this town have the ability to staff the infrastructure? And that plays back into the perfect scenario with the Y. So I think there's an ebb and a flow, and of course, you also have a very large facility for profit in the town, right, that attracts a great deal of people. And we have an ice rink and we have a multi-use athletic facility, and to some extent, you don't want to start to be in competition with the tax-paying base. So there's I think there's always a delicate balance that we're just going to have to find.
Did you say this was right down the street from the South County Y as well? Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's pretty much right,
Well, 30,000 people, they have.
short walk away. But from what I remember, the South County Y has a pool. I don't remember the South County, I mean, I haven't been in it since I was a kid, but I don't remember them having a large gymnasium. I remember the pool. I think it's just the pool. Yeah, so it's not like they're duplcating
Right, they're not really
services with
competing, per
them.
se.
There was a racquetball court, it was, I forget the name of it now. It was a health club down there. They since closed, but they didn't really have, they were more fitness service based rather than gymnasium sport based. But it's something that we will wrestle with, and I think continue to wrestle with, is the balance between serving the community, because if we build something, groups that use it in town maybe should not incur a cost. If if it's a town-run, built building, you make your money on outside groups coming in to use it. How much time can you dedicate towards outdoor groups coming in to use it if you are trying to service the needs of the community between basketball groups, if scouts, if other groups want to come in and use rooms? It's something that there's no easy answer to, but we will continue to wrestle with and try and work through that problem.
And we do that in town now, through the school department. The school department has tiers for different groups to use their facilities. So town-based groups either don't pay at all or pay a reduced rate as compared to, and I'll give, for example, the turf field. The NSYSA plays games on the turf field and don't charge, or did. I don't know if that's still the case, but back when we did. And they also bring in revenue from club teams who pay a full rate for renting the field per se. So that certainly can work.
So one of the things that struck me when the folks from the Y were talking is it's a pretty big property. It's limited in that we can't go absolutely nuts and build everything we want there, but there's enough to have multiple things going on, right? So this idea of having someone like the Y come in who's going to cover 60, 70% of what our residents are looking for, right? But they also don't want to pay for it because they want it to be a community center that they can enjoy without, they're already paying taxes. They don't want to pay to have to go to the Y too. So I was wondering, is there something else that could be done on the site to subsidize resident memberships to the Y? Whether it's renting it out for office space or just some sort of revenue generating thing that's either reducing our residents' rates to access the Y or, canceling them out entirely so that folks who are North Smithfield residents can go to the Y. We can still have folks from outside town coming and using it, but they're paying. So I don't know, you just think about that relationship between the site as a whole and, the revenue that we're bringing in, but also the costs that, something like this is gonna take. I don't know.
I think that's kind of where Steve was going about the residents feeling like they're getting some benefit for it, right? I think a fair number of people would probably feel as though if the recommendation was to put a Y there, yes, on paper, it's everything that everybody asked for, but I think first glance would be, that's not what I asked for, right? It would have the pool, whatever amenities and facilities and programs, but first reaction would be, that's not what I want.
I think that's what I was trying to get out of them in a way is, okay, if we build a building and it has similar features, a gym, multi-purpose rooms, and the Y were to come in and staff it, what does that look like? Is there a cost associated with that? I'm sure there is. You know, if you want to participate in a fitness class, the instructor needs to get paid from the Y. So is there a participation fee in that? Not necessarily a Y membership fee, but I got to pay $20 to go to this fitness class for the next 4 weeks. So what does that look like as far as money goes, cost to residents? It's obviously a cost for the staff. So I would be interested in, as we go down this process, is exploring that more with the Y, because I think they're built to, it's hard to ramp up our recreation department from 0 to 100 and staff a building, as well as the town itself, the cost of operating this building, ramp it up from 0 to 100. But with somebody like the Y, they are built to come in and help us out to offer things until we get to that point. Maybe there's a point 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line after the facility is built where we can operate it ourselves, but we're not, I don't know how the town is ready once that building opens to operate it. So pursuing the Y, you know, keeping in contact with them, I think is important, and continuing a dialogue with them is important, because I think they have a role to play. I just don't know what that role is right now.
That's kind of what I was asking, is if they ever just like white labeled their model, their services, right? Like most people would say, that's not what I asked for as a YMCA. But if we built a building and we called it the Halliwell Community Center, and everybody that was working there had, you know, XYZ shirt on, not the Y, but the guts or the inside of the building is the Y, right? It's their staff, it's their model, it's their spec sheet, but it's just not called the Y. Like, how important is their brand to them?
Sounded to me like it was important to have it called the Y. Yeah, definitely got that.
Yeah, I don't know why an entity like that would want to, they have no desire, because if you don't have that name recognition, they're not getting the benefit of their investment.
But what investment, well,
You're asking them to serve as a contracted operating entity to, I don't think that meets their model for their.
Could be the
corporate-
Halliwell Y.
I think you
Right?
have to give them the name. And now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't
Heritage Park
give
Y,
them
Westwood Y.
part of the building and then still keep the other part. And maybe because they have, quote, their part, they would then be willing to go into the school, the town's part, and do part of what you're saying, knowing that they do have this section that is theirs. That could be viable, because you're saying, look, you have your entity here, now can you supplement us in this building? So that has that's certainly something that's worthy of
Well,
consideration. But the last thing I wanted to say, I was gonna look quick to see it, but I think in today's world, it's a misconception for anyone to think that a town of this size would ever be able to just carte blanche give an open door policy to residents to come in and utilize well-run facilities and programs at no cost. I mean, I don't think it's practical to think that there's enough revenue generated in this small town to cover those costs. And those people, the seniors, the young, everybody would have to understand that, yes, maybe we do some outreach, maybe we get some funding for
paying?
progressive, but you have to pay something.
Yeah, are they paying for these programs? If there's an exercise class or a yoga class?
Yes, so I know, I spoke to Steve a little bit about the gym rental. I'm not 100% sure, but the classes, like, they brought an instructor in, they have an agreement with the instructor where there's kind of a revenue share with the instructor. It starts at, I believe, 60%, and then increases so it's beneficial for the instructor to promote his or her program to get more people in. That generates more money for the town, but also generates more money for the instructor.
But the bottom line is the programs are at cost.
Yes.
Whether they're reduced or not, they're at cost.
It's not unreasonable to have something and charge a cost to it. I struggle with that in my job, and that if you offer something for free, there's no investment in the parent to then, if it's a child program, to take their child. They can say, I didn't pay anything for it, so I'm just not gonna take my kid today. If you paid $20, $30, $50 for a program, you're like, well, I'm gonna make sure that my kid gets up out of bed at 9 o'clock in the morning to go to this program because I paid for it and I have an investment, a monetary investment, so I don't think it's out of.
And the flip side of that is, why should I pay for it if I'm not using it? And if the cost is borne on taxpayers and they don't see the value in utilizing it, then it becomes an issue.
And I think we can look at these sort of things as like the library. The library has programs. It's open to the public to go in for free, get your books. But the children's programs, there's a cost associated with those. So I think there's a couple different models that we could certainly be exploring for, you know, how we're gonna staff this, how we're gonna gain some revenue from this, because I think, you know, one of the projects that I worked on up in Weston, Mass, which is, you know, very high end. It's a little bit different up in Weston, but we renovated an existing library, created 3 spaces that are just rentable. One of them has 3D printers, another one is like a paint studio, and people come in, they pay for their classes, or they pay and rent their space. They have basically a space like this that they can use for functions. So, and that was all done through taxpayer money, but you're still paying to use the building. So, I think we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves as far as the functionality and how this building is going to be run, as opposed to where we should be kind of keeping this is all great that we're keeping this in mind, but I think we also need to keep in mind that we look at what this building's actually going to be, what we're going to be providing for the community, what services and amenities are we going to be putting into this building, and going from there.
I think it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, right? Because you think about service and amenities, and natural next question is, who's gonna provide it and who's gonna do it? And that gets us to the conversation that we're in now. So, but actually, I was just looking at the website for this, and, you know, their facility rental fee schedule is published online, and South Kingston residents pay it's half the rate versus out-of-town residents for basketball courts, outdoor, indoor, softball fields, skate parks, tennis courts, the gymnasium. There's a menu of things that South Kingston residents have to pay for. It's not as though they can just come in and use it for free.
Thank you, sir. Very well.
Well, thank you, yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, so our next item is for discussion, review, and action, Weston and Sampson final report comments. We didn't get our final report. That's been kicked down the road a little ways, and we never got a memo explaining the September invoice, so we're just going to continue on and move over to item number 5 for discussion, review, and action. Review of the 5 concepts and some start thinking about recommendations to the town council. What I wanted to really do is, you know, I don't think as a group, we have not had the opportunity to just openly discuss the 5 concepts that have been in front of us. We've always been talking with community members. We've always been getting feedback from folks outside of this committee. So I think really what I would like to initially start off is just discussing some of these concepts, and, you know, it's kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down sort of thing based on everyone's feel and what we know from our surveys, our discussions, kind of what people are thinking of what direction we are going to go in.
Well, Jeff, to save us some time, I'm just curious, when you were with the council, did they react? Did they see 1 through 5?
Other than attending the Pumpkin Fest booth, I don't believe they have all been looking at the concept plans.
So none of these have been presented to them at a formal meeting?
No.
Okay.
Weston and Sampson have not attended a town council meeting yet to show them their progress or their final reports. So what they do know is what Steve and I have reported back to them, as well as just, all of this stuff has been posted to the website, and at the Pumpkin Fest tent that we had.
Well, honestly, I think, I know that all of us had very clear thoughts on the options, but the key to our clear thoughts, I think, fundamental to it was the fact that we were all leaning very strongly towards the simple reality that none of the structures were rehabable, were not usable, non-viable. So if that's the case, by definition, you eliminate probably 4 of the 5 plans. So in my opinion, there's no sense in dwelling unless we see that as a very base for future buildings that may occupy the same general footprint. But I think it puts us to concept 4 and 5 without any other really viable option.
So my overall feeling on these concepts is that they were great stimulus to get people to react to certain things. I would be hesitant to take any of these and present them, as saying this is 75% of what the town should do, with a couple things here and there. Weston and Sampson, they threw these together. There were errors in a few different places. It didn't consider a lot of what we had told them. We heard from the community. So I thought that these were helpful in that they got the conversation going with people and, elicited some strong reactions for a few specific points. But I wouldn't lean too hard into any of these in what we recommend to the town council. I would, sort of abstract what the takeaways are from these concepts and say, here's our recommendation based on what we heard from these, but don't look at these and think this is what the committee is saying you should do, because I don't think that's it.
And I think, one thing that we should really underscore is that these are very highly conceptual plans and that they need to be further refined to really be explored appropriately. And again, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to look at what our next steps would be, and ultimately combined I think we're going to have quite a list of recommendations that we make to the town council. I think we need to make a recommendation on what to do with the existing buildings, a recommendation of what the future plans are going to be for the property, a recommendation, which we've already made motions for the RFQ and the RFP, and then a recommendation about what this committee ultimately evolves as. Because I think we are really kind of nearing the end of our task that has been outlined in the resolution that I shared with you all, which was to ultimately provide those recommendations for the town council to then make an informed decision on how to move forward. So I think having said that, really, again, what I'd like to have a conversation about is, we've been talking concepts 4 and 5. What aspects of 4 and 5 are the driving factors behind them? Is it because we have one building where all of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, the elevator systems can all be incorporated into one building, and that essentially achieves a cost savings? Is it the splash pad that's really being a driving force that we've heard a lot of folks in town think that could be, something that's very successfully run and bring in a lot of, activity to the area? Is it the multitude of trails that could be had that connect Green Street to the property, that connect Victory Highway down to School Street, over to Roselawn, and even over to the senior living that's on the west side of the property? It's all these various things that we can really start to make almost a laundry or a grocery list or a laundry list of all these things that ultimately ultimately should be considered while the town council decides how to move forward.
Yeah, but
I was gonna, I think we're getting hung up looking at that. I think, you know, you're right. I think the concept in front of us is the white space right there next to concept 5. And I think that's what we need to present to the council is the map without any building. We all know that the buildings aren't viable. We all know what the community wants. And the next step is, how do we put that out to RFP to put that on that white space?
Yeah, but I think you gotta take a breath possibly and maybe put your, whether we think like politicians or not. The town council paid 80-odd thousand dollars. The public knows full well what they paid. And if we go to them and say, nothing that your consultant gave us met our threshold, that would mean, by definition, the only thing we gained for 80,000 was a delineation of wetlands, which we could have done on our own.
Plus the fact that the buildings weren't viable.
Well, but that's a subjective analysis. I mean, for $5,000, you probably could have paid a structural engineer and an architect to walk around and say to you, you know what, they're laced with asbestos, they're structurally flawed, all the mechanical systems are gone. So my point is, we want to save a little bit of face here. And the other thing is, I don't think it's productive for us to search our brains, to be creative, until we get some feedback. I was the one who said 3 and 4 and 5, but now I'm of the mindset to say, send it all up. Send it all up. This is what you paid for. You should see it. Let them, Weston and Sampson's going to give whatever report they're going to give. Let them see those. Let them respond to us. Give us some feedback. Say to us, we have concluded from reading the report that the buildings are not viable, that it would be a profound waste of money to try to fix them. All right, so now, subcommittee, we understand that we could indicate that our preference is 4 or 5, if that's what we say, but let them see everything. And don't give them a laundry list until they come back to us and say, well, you know, because they're the ones that are going to decide. Let them tell us what they're thinking. They're the elected officials. We can come up with 1,000 wonderful ideas, but if they don't have it in their mind, some direction as a unit, are we going in which direction, then our time is much more valuable. If they say to us, yes, we endorse 100% the idea of a multi-use structure for youth and seniors. Okay, great. Now all we have to do is focus on that. And outdoors, we want this. But I mean, I'm of the mindset to make them, give us something.
Here's what Weston and Sampson developed. We have reviewed them and feel a single multi-use structure is the soundest way to go. They can say, we don't. They can respond. I think we should be able to say to them, as a committee, here's the direction we feel we should go. I think we owe them that. I think we owe them something.
Well, no, yeah.
Here it is, guys, what do you think?
Well, no, we owe them that, but it's a two-step process. We should not give them a book. Let them engage us and say, we received the initial information. This is our feedback to you, committee, through your chairman. Now, committee, focus on what we gave you as feedback. So when we spend these hours coming up with the supplemental ideas, it's on point. We're not out here because our minds are here. Let's find out where their minds are. You're right. They're entitled to everything. But all I'm trying to get is for them to give us some initial feedback so we can chart a course based on their thoughts, not just ours.
Have you, Jeff, at this point, been keeping them up to date as to the condition of the buildings? Would the average council person say, it's very possible we could probably use some of those buildings where they say those buildings aren't viable?
I can't recall everything that Steve has reported back to the council at this point, but I know we have made mention at one of the meetings in the past that it was recommended that buildings 1 through 4 were not viable to be used. It hasn't been presented to them that because I mean, we discussed it at our last meeting, that after reading the entirety of the report, that we're all feeling like these buildings are not usable any further, based on the assessment that we've gotten from our contracted professionals. So, you know, I understand what Robert is saying. I understand what you're saying. But I think what needs to happen in this process is that Weston and Sampson needs to complete their report, provide a presentation to town council so that they can see all these concepts, they can hear all about the assessments, they can hear all about the wetlands, everything that we've been contracted to do with them. And then they lay out their executive summary as we've requested. And then at that point, after their presentation, we should come in and say, this is our recommendation, that we agree with Weston and Sampson's executive summary that none of the buildings are viable. You know, these concept plans are purely theoretical with some of them. It was the thought that maybe the building pad could be reused, and, you know, there's some further explanation that needs to go on with these concepts. So I think what ultimately we need to follow the process that's kind of been outlined is Weston and Sampson needs to wrap up their report, they present, and then we let the presentation go, we let the town council digest that for the night, and then at the next meeting, we would essentially provide our recommendations. And then I think at that point, if we need to have a joint, I know the MBRTF and the town council have had a joint meeting with the police station. We could do something similar, so we could have a discussion. They could ask questions. We could respond back and forth. And then ultimately, at the end of that meeting, if we have a joint meeting, we have a clear direction of, okay, now we're going to be going in this way.
Well, the only addition.
Have you got a tentative schedule for that, Jeff, that meeting?
No,
All right.
Because
we've been at this for a while. I'd like
Yeah.
to see some interaction with the town council on this. I appreciate the fact that Steve's here with us and you meet with them, but you know what? I think we need some direction. And we are not decision makers. They are. And another component of what the town council is going to do is they're going to see how it plays politically as well. So that's a big component here too. We need to get with the council. They are the ones who are going to determine where this goes, not us. As soon as we can get a finished product, if you will, from Weston and Sampson, that's going to go in front of the council. We need direction going forward because ultimately they're deciding on where it's going.
Well, based on the tone of the council meeting, I don't think we can do anything, send anything up, communicate anything up to them until Weston and Sampson that's what they want. That's from the tone that I gathered. The council wants to know, be informed of things that we've learned, and Weston and Sampson will need to go before the council and present that stuff before we can say, we like concept 5, we like parts of concept this. They're waiting on that information, not necessarily from us, but from the professionals that were paid $80,000 to put the information together.
They need to show the people this is what we paid for. Right. And my only point, which mirrors kind of what Tony, and it mirrors you, Jeff, except the only thing I'm saying is in between us going to them, let them give us feedback from the presentation from Weston and Sampson first, even if it's just a superficial. Then we go back and say, okay, now this is our reasoned analysis. If you decide to go the other way, I'll support 100%, but I just think it's better for them to give us feedback. Okay, they just gave you this big presentation, you saw the 5. Give us some feedback, and then the committee will digest the feedback and do exactly what you said. I just think by doing this, we're forcing the politicians to start to make definitive decisions, and then we'll support them because they're going to lead the way.
So is Weston and Sampson going to deliver the executive summary with a recommendation, or are they going to basically come in with their executive summary findings, and these are the concepts we presented?
that's what I've asked for,
The latter?
the first one,
Oh, executive summary with recommendations.
with the recommendations.
I don't think they're going to give it to us, though.
So I think what we, at minimum, we have to do prior to Weston and Sampson presenting to Weston, to the town council, is at least delineate, coming up, based on their report, we feel that these buildings are not viable. Because I think they need a little bit of direction. They need a little bit of guidance, because I don't think, this report is already fairly thick. It's got a lot of language that could be, that is hard to read at times, even for me, and I'm in the business, and what we need to do is be able to kind of dial it back from all that fancy language and say, these are our conclusions, based on Weston and Sampson's report, these are our conclusions, based on at the very least, the viability of these existing buildings. As far as the everything else goes, that can still be on the table, and that can still be a discussion, and they can still have, they can read about the charrette that we had and all of the information that we got from the public at that charrette, and all the information with our surveys, and they can digest that information, and then we can revisit that at a later time.
So I think you're right, and what we don't want to do is go to the council and do exactly what Weston and Sampson is doing to us, which is saying, here's a bunch of information, here are some options, but it's not really a recommendation about what we should be doing, right? So I think we have to, and part of what we're doing tonight, I think, is identifying what's the scope of the recommendations that we even want to make, right? Like how detailed should we get? Should it be like a mapped out concept? Or should it just be a more general, we don't think that you should keep the buildings based on the work Weston and Sampson has done. We think that, the project is moving towards this idea of a single building community center, whether it's a partnership with the Y or whether it's, a town-run facility or whatever. That's something that's still to be determined. What even does the future of this committee look like? That's a recommendation that we have to make. What does the next phase of this project look like? What should they do from this point? So, I think we have to figure out where that line is based on the work that we've done, based on what Weston and Sampson has given us, and figure out even what that scope of the recommendation is.
One thing I think the resolution or the motion is we need to take a moment and read it.
Yeah, we should.
There's two items in the motion, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is because the meat and potatoes is item F. Quote, make recommendations to the town council on the potential future uses of the Halliwell property and buildings for its consideration. So in a nutshell, but it also says we did that, review information provided by the consultants, we've done that. But what's confusing is, but F is very clear in saying, all we're going to do is, we're not doing anything more than that according to this legislation. We're just going to give them the laundry list of X, Y, and Z, and then, by definition, our task is done. However, what's a little bit ambiguous here is item A and item C. Review the public facility needs of the town. I don't really understand how you define that. And then C, review all existing public facilities, improvement plans as accepted by the town council. I don't quite understand the definition or the meaning of that. So I didn't want to complicate it, but I think at some point we have to look at this. And it all feeds back. However we do this, I want the council to give us some initial feedback to say, we're on the same road as you now.
Yep.
Give us some more of your information. That's all I'm asking for.
Yep, we need that.
Well, you need Weston and Sampson asking the presentation.
Well, yeah, and I think we also have to ask them, what's next? Do they expand the scope of the committee's role? Because
it's almost like it goes from Halliwell Discovery Committee to like Planning Committee.
yeah, planning or implementation or something like that. But I think, Robert, the key words there are, to me, feel like potential future uses, right? Potential meaning we're not saying you need to do this, like this is the right way to go. These are options, right? And uses, it's plural. So we're saying, It could be something that the town runs, and here's sort of a general shape of what that looks like, and here are some of the things that people are interested in. One of the uses might be exploring a partnership with the Y, but I think as part of this, the recommendation needs to be the town should move this to the next step, which is that implementation phase or planning phase or whatever, however they want to term that, which is exploring those uses in more detail, whether it's an RFQ, whether it's doing more talking to the Y folks or whatever. We're sort of coming to the end of our road here, and our recommendation needs to be, well, let's keep this going, and here's how, right? Here are the paths that we might take. Let's figure out which one's the right one.
And then I think at that point, that's going to be their responsibility to decide and vote and amend the resolution or not, as it may be, to keep the momentum going for us. I've always felt that this committee has, out of all the committees in town, I think we have the most momentum of building something that's productive and good in the town. And we're a government entity, and we're actually moving fairly quickly, which doesn't always happen. I did want to take I know I sent an email out to you all with the revised agenda and everything, but I did want to take a moment to just address some of the comments that were said at the town council meeting. And it was certainly not our intention to overstep our boundaries. I think in our kind of our sight lines was the future next steps. So we were preparing these RFPs and RFQs to recommend to the town council, so then that way they are ready and prepared to move forward. So by no means was I, as the chairman, trying to overstep our bounds and overtake power by any means necessary. It was just a well-intentioned step that I misunderstood a little bit. There's a little bit more of a definitive pathway for the RFP and RFQ process, which I now know a little bit more about. So just going to put it out there and apologize and say I'm sorry if I stepped on any toes, but that was certainly not the intention of getting those documents rolling and moving forward.
You know what, Jeff? We've been meeting for 7 months, and we've had little to no, outside of yourself getting in front of the council and Steve attending the meetings, we've had little to no feedback, interaction, anything from the council. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we want to hit a home run with this, right? This is a winner for the town of North Smithfield, and I think the council wants to hit a home run with this. And the bottom line is that's the facility that Scott presented to us in South Kingstown, $6 million. The only reason that got built is because the voters in the town of South Kingstown saw the value in reaching deeper into their pockets and paying $6 million. So I know the council recognizes that, and it's time that we all get on the same page.
Well, I think that's a great point. And I think to Robert's point, maybe it's worth having a joint session with the Halliwell committee and the town council to sort of talk this through, right? Before we make the final recommendations, so that we have a sense of, where their heads are at. We can present some of this stuff. And, maybe that's something that happens after Weston and Sampson presents, and they get a chance to digest that, and we can say, okay, that's what they did. Here's what we did in conjunction with them. Let's talk it through, and then we'll go back and we'll compile the recommendations, based on sort of what you're telling us, right? And what we've learned and where we think we can meet in the middle. That might be a good process to follow here. I don't know.
In regards to Jeff's comments, I never got the impression from this committee that we were trying to usurp any legislative or executive functions or responsibilities. I appreciate the momentum at which you were trying to push this committee. I think that momentum was kind of grounded to a halt when we couldn't get Weston and Sampson to really meet our deadline, which we thought was a realistic deadline, but apparently they may have other ideas of a deadline. So I understand the council's frustration that we've done all this work. We know all this work in our head. We've seen it. We've lived it for 7 months. They don't know any of it for the most part beyond communications from Jeff and Steve. So I understand their frustration that we've seen this report, we've been able to digest it, and they have not. I don't know if that falls on us. I think that falls on Weston and Sampson. So hopefully we can have a chance to bring that to them soon, and they can understand how we've worked, where we've gotten to, and where we want to go, and will support us in that in any way they can.
Agreed.
I like the idea of Chris's last comment because it ties in, I think, everything we've all tried to touch on, is unless we see that there's a reason not to, that we ask the council to have a joint workshop, a meeting, whatever, however you want to phrase it, after the Weston and Sampson report, give them 2 weeks to digest it. We have a joint meeting, and it's going to be an open exchange. Phrase it that way. We are going to come in with our knowledge of what we've lived and what we've heard, and we're going to benefit by hearing them. And then we will be most productive in getting back to them and saying, okay, now we'll give you a reasoned, thorough assessment. So I endorse it 100%. I'd be willing to make a motion if you think that we want to go in that direction.
I think what we would need to do really is realistically, Chris and I have a conversation with Weston and Sampson and say, when is the soonest realistically that you can get this report completed, and when will you be prepared to make a presentation? Because otherwise, we're just going to be sitting here twiddling our thumbs every other Thursday night, and I don't want to be doing that. I want to make sure that we are having productive meetings like we have been for the past 7 months. So I think that will probably, I got a response from Weston and Sampson, the representative for them, Carolyn, was out on vacation this week, so next Monday, the two of us can make a phone call, say, all right, let's have a realistic discussion here.
If I could, though, would it not be at this point in time, since we've been more than lenient, I suggest that maybe we start to draw a line in the sand. And you guys say to them, we see no reason why you cannot be ready to present on this date. Give them a reasonable time.
Right.
But I would use that authority of saying, we see no reason why you cannot be.
The next council meeting is, find out when that is, and say, on the agenda.
Yeah, so in fairness, Jeff has done that very thing a couple of times, and it's not playing well. However, withholding of funds usually plays pretty well. Yeah. So we do have a couple of outstanding invoices, and we don't have to pay them until they finish.
We also have a solicitor that can help us write a letter that says you're under contract and we're asking you to perform. We don't want to start to go that route, but we have to communicate a sense of urgency that this needs to be wrapped up.
What is the delay? The thing that, I have not been told what the delay is, but we have been, the response for when I asked to have them ready for the November 1st town council meeting was that they are contractually obligated to complete the work within a year.
Yeah.
So
that would be.
So that would be in,
date on the contract?
I believe that was in March
Of 21?
of 21.
Well, I mean,
So,
those are the terms, those are the terms.
I think there's a couple avenues that we can review with Weston and Sampson before withholding funds, before getting the solicitor involved. I think we just need to have a simple, frank discussion and hammer out what the holdups are, understand them. Chris and I can communicate that to this committee.
But are they responding to you?
Sometimes.
So I'll tell you what, Jeff, I'll reach out tomorrow. I'll ask if we can have a Zoom to discuss sort of where we are, expectations around timeline, and stuff. And see if we can just get
point of view, what really, I mean, put all the diplomacy and all the other rhetoric aside, what is left? Just the summary verbiage of the report? We never did get the structural analysis, did we? So what action items And maybe my suggestion is, you know, you're all businessmen, but maybe
Right.
my suggestion is get them to define the action items. Okay, you said, well, what is left? Put it in writing. Tell me in Zoom, what is left for you to achieve, and how are you going to achieve it? Because I think it's reasonable for us to say, yeah, okay, you want to play volley for serve? You can reference the signature on the contract, and we can reference other things if we want. We don't want to
Yeah.
go that route, but let's not start playing games here.
Exactly,
What do
no.
you need to do, and what is in your way?
Yeah, and I've been if I haven't said it in an email form yet, I mean, what can we do to help you move this along? Is there something that you're waiting on from us? Is there further direction that you require to move this forward? And they haven't responded to it. And what's frustrating on my part is, you know, they've provided us with 2 tentative schedules that had things completed by the end of August. Carolyn sat where Chris is a couple meetings ago, saying that we're ready to wrap this up. So we're getting mixed messages here, and I think it's just going to be a conversation that we need to have, and if we need to, you know, bring in the town administrator, because he's the signee on the contract, then, you know,
Just
can do
a
that too.
thought, Jeff. Weston Sampson's not working for this committee, right? They're working for the town of North Smithfield. So maybe a letter was written by the town of North Smithfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very easily could be.
Well, that's what I meant when I said the solicitor. You can do it in
Yeah.
any form you want, but
Yeah.
it carries a touch more.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Yeah, okay.
So just to come back and kind of wrap up what our next steps look like. So it's pushing Weston to get this final report, make their final presentation to the council. It's then, you know, potentially having a joint working session with the council to discuss that report, discuss our preliminary findings,
Mm-hmm.
and then going back and having a meeting or two where we are sort of refining our recommendations on next steps, right? Okay.
I think so.
I'd go so far as to say I think we need to do that, or I'd like to see us do that, regardless of where Weston and Sampson stands.
I would agree with Tony. If they're not going to perform,
Yeah.
and we don't want to get into a battle, if we have to wait until March, we all have enough knowledge, and so we could move forward and not let them become if they're going to start to play games with us.
Yeah, if nothing else, right?
I think, why don't we revisit where we are at our next meeting? Before let's do Plan A first, and then if we need to come up with a Plan B, we'll do Plan B.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer if we can have that conversation with Weston and Sampson
Yeah.
and get them moving and have, you know, this wrapped up in the next week or two. I would prefer for them to present to council, because if we have the discussion with council, then we're essentially presenting what Weston and Sampson is going to do, because otherwise they're flying blind,
Yeah.
right?
And then we also have to deal with perception as well. Because if we're presenting it, is it going to be perceived that we are guiding town council to something that you know, it's just a perception issue. And I would rather have our paid professionals come, do what they're being paid to do in their contract, get that done, and then that way the council can ask them the questions as opposed to us, because we didn't write the report, we've guided them to write the report. So, yeah.
I agree. Certainly that would be preferable, if it can happen expediently, right?
Yeah. So, you know, I had gotten correspondence back from them that, you know, the November 1st deadline for the presentation to town council might not be achievable. So the next town council meeting after that would be November 15th. So, again, why don't we have that Chris and I have that conversation, and then we'll disperse to the committee through email. Okay, this is going to be our plan of action. Steve can report that to the council at one of the next meetings, and go from there.
The only other thing, if you could, even if you want to ask Steve to send it up the chain, for this legislation, or not legislation, this motion that created us, should we not get a definition of A and B? I mean, I don't understand them, and they potentially have impacts. So if they were just thrown in there to create verbiage, that's one thing, but if the town council is gonna look at that, then I think we need a little bit more feedback as to what you truly meant when you wrote those words.
I think B really comes down to the assessment that we've asked Weston and Sampson to do. Review the condition.
I agree. My issue was A,
Yep.
which is an extremely broad, and C, which we don't even know if such a thing exists.
Okay.
But if we're moving to essentially another phase of essentially a new resolution, right? It would be from discovery to planning or implementation. Do we want to even go there, or do we want to just help shape the next one?
I just don't want to be blindsided. You're right. They could just be deleted, but they put it in there. Did they put it there for a reason? And if they did, what is the reason? Because we haven't done any of that, and it's no fault of our own. It's a very broad statement. So what did you mean?
I think I posed that question to Steve at the start of this whole thing, and I was wondering, does that mean that we're supposed to work with the MBRTF to talk about, because they're basically in charge of, building improvement, right? But it's within a certain scope. So I don't think we got an answer on that, but it would be good to know that, what that is, so that we can know that we've met our obligation.
And if we don't need to do anything,
Right.
because it was an omission, then fine. Then nobody can say, well, you never addressed this.
Right. So I'll share that concern with Steve, so then that way he can march that up the chain, speak with the rest of the council, speak with the solicitor on that. If there was any reasoning for the language, if we could get clarification on it, then that would be, that's what I'll do.
So, Robert, you're referring to, where on the second page of the resolution says HRC shall be charged with the following duties, A, B, and C.
Yes.
Review all existing public facilities improvement plans we have an asset management committee in town too, who may already have some of that information, right?
I have talked with Paul Nordstrom, who is on that committee, and they have been reviewing all the assets, every town asset, and not just the buildings, and they have not gotten to the buildings at this point. They've gone through cars, they've gone through all the equipment in town, so I think that's a very, very much of a living document that they are still working to compile. So, I think we have. This has been nice. I haven't had to talk that much this meeting. It's been fantastic. So thank you everybody else for that's been doing all the talking. So, as I have in my notes, Chris and I will reach out to Weston and Sampson, but really our next kind of steps with town council is presentation to the town council by Weston and Sampson, receiving feedback from them. We have a joint meeting to talk about the feedback and discuss, and then we will have a meeting with our committee to formulate our recommendations to formally present to town council.
So it's not going to be a big agenda on the 4th.
No, probably just invoice and keep your fingers crossed for maybe a final report. But we are, in this resolution also, we are obligated to meet once a month. So, because the November 18th meeting is going to be foregone and go to the planning board, we will have to meet in some capacity for the 4th.
Well, if Weston and Sampson meets that November 1st obligation, we could potentially have a special meeting with the town council at some point in November, right?
I would think so.
Okay.
I think they would be certainly happy to hear that from us, and, an early Christmas present. All right, so our next meeting is November 4th. If there are no other comments or discussion points on the agenda as listed, I'll look for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All right. Boy, all in favor? All right. Thank you very much.